Hey, it's 3 minutes after the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Tina Henne. I'm the early career development lead at Argonne National Lab, and I'm uh, honored to be here to share this topic with you. We have some excellent panelists lined up to share some practical tips. We were talking a little bit beforehand that there really is no one right answer or one right way to manage your time or to build resilience. So we thought it'd be good to hear for advice from professionals from different careers. And I'm glad to be sharing this with you and co-hosting with you by my colleague Sergio. Sergio, you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi everybody.
Okay.
Well, you remember me from the another webinar we had 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, he's been a real trooper, right, Kevin? Okay, so first we're going to introduce ourselves, I guess. Sergio, if you want to say a little more.
Yeah. Okay,
Forgot
just
these were in here.
really quick. I'm PhD in computer science. I'm senior researcher at Barcelona Supercomputing right now. And yeah, I'm researching in dynamic resource management, in network offloading. And no, I've been serving in many supercomputing committees since I was a student volunteer. Thanks, Tina.
Thanks. And I'm what does it mean to be early career development lead? I primarily work with our postdocs and our named fellows and early career researchers at Argonne. I started there as a postdoc myself in biological sciences. I'm a microbiologist by training, but I've been in this role for the past 13 and a half years. And over the time have learned a lot about what professionals need. Surprise, I need the same things, so it's helped me grow as well. And now I've had the chance to build mentoring programs for all employees. Piece of advice, one thing that I think is time cannot be managed, but what you do with your time can. So time is what it is. There's only so many minutes and hours in the day. It's up to us to decide what we do with that. Okay, before we get into our panel, so if you've been through, if you've attended the other pre-conference webinars, we've taken a bit of a panel approach to the topics this year. So we welcome questions, especially, type into the chat, raise your hand when we get to the Q&A. We do have some guiding questions to help with the discussion, but we're hoping for good audience participation. So before we get started with that, just some quick tips and resources that I thought would be helpful in diving more into these topics and looking at some actual tools that you can use. There's a free online course and resources developed around resilience from this group called the Postdoc Academy. Even though it says postdoc, you don't have to be a postdoc to access their materials because they're freely available online. I'll show you in a second what these look like. There's a method called getting things done to managing your time, and it's based on a book called Managing Your Time and Getting Things Done, which has a very strategic approach to taking inventory of all of the things that you have to do and all of the things that are occupying time in your head, and how do you sort those out and be more strategic with what you do and your priorities. And there's actually a crowdsourced page on LinkedIn where professionals in the computing sciences answer the question, what are the best ways to remain resilient in computer science? So that should relate directly to this audience. So just a little bit about what these look like. When you go to the Postdoc Academy site, that if you click on that link, you're going to see a series of video interviews, many clips on tips and approaches, interviewing professionals in the academic field, They explain what they think resilience is, and not only in the context of bouncing back, but supporting your well-being and making a plan to go forward. So there's discussion prompts, there's a series of videos, there's links to resources. Here's an example of an action plan. This group is very big on action plans, so putting your learning into practice. So I highly recommend that. There's a website that goes through the getting things done method for managing your time, as well as giving you examples of what do these things look like. So for example, one of the things that this method teaches is building a real to-do list with actions and deadlines. So if you look at your to-do list every day, you might have things like complete that project, send this email. Being more specific with that can help you keep things straight in your mind, and also give you a stronger sense of accomplishment. Because sometimes when things are too overwhelming, we want to break them up into smaller tasks. So giving each of those tasks a specific, putting some parameters about it and being as specific as we can with those tasks is very helpful. Okay, so that's the background information. Oh, and I forgot about the crowdsource. So the crowdsource link on LinkedIn, they're doing this a lot, actually. So if you're not active on LinkedIn, this is maybe one reason to get active. Is you see a lot of career advice and advice on different topics now that's being shared. This one is in particular is targeted to computer scientists, and it looks at, how do you stay resilient? What does that mean? Things like embracing challenges, defining goals, seeking feedback. And the folks who weigh in are people in your field. So it should be some good advice there from people who have walked the walk. Okay, now let's get to the reason why you're here today. I'm gonna have our panelists introduce themselves. So we'll go through one by one. So when you see your slide come up, that's your prompt to come off mute and introduce yourselves. First, we have Maria Ribera Samso from BSc, Manager of Education and Training, and also Professor, and I'm not even gonna try saying that that name, University Polytechnica. Okay. Todd Munson is from Argonne National Lab. He's a senior computational scientist and an R&D leader. Betsy Hillary from Purdue University, Director of Data Initiatives at the Regent Streif Center for Healthcare Engineering, and Abhinav Patel, who's with the University of Maryland, Associate Professor in Computer Science and Director of the Parallel Software Systems Group. Okay, so those are just names and titles. Let's see who they are. But one thing that we hope that you do when I stop sharing my screen and we get to just the Q&A and the panel portion, if everyone's welcome to turn on their camera if you feel comfortable doing that, and if you're in a place that you can do that, it's good to see faces while we have these conversations. Okay, Maria, you want to kick us off?
Okay, good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I wish to start thanking the organizers for inviting me to share my personal experience related to time management. I was commenting before that it has been an enriching experience with myself to review my professional life from this perspective. I had never considered, right, how I manage my time, what did I do well, what I did wrong, which aspects of my time management are attributable only to my personality or my character, and which are learned. So let's try. As Tina said, I'm the manager of education and training at BSc, and I've been professor for more than 35 years. Well, okay, first associate, then tenured professor, and then professor at Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya. And if I properly understood Tina, I should do a short review of my life, taking into account time management. Am I right, Tina? I should go to my quickly to my life, isn't it?
Yeah, real quick, and that's the tips that
Okay.
you have.
Okay, so I will do it. I will quickly go over my professional career. I completed the equivalent to a master in computer science in 87, so I'm very old. During the final years of my master, I began collaborating on research tasks, and so I found there the first interest to research, right? Then I started my PhD, but at that time there was no funding available for young researchers. So I had to work as associate professor while also working on my thesis, right? This was the first really hard experience because I should learn how to be a teacher, how to meet the demands of teaching while also meeting the demands of a doctoral thesis that, study, make proposals, publish, and so on and so forth. Just after the PhD, I continued my university career. Then at that moment, the competition to become tenured professor was very tough. Many candidates, strong competition. And by that time, I became mother for the first time, right? I suppose that the topic of work-life balance will come up in the discussion because it is also important, no? It's also driving our time management, right? In 1998, I accepted the position of head of studies at the UPC School of Informatics. 2 years after that, my second child was born. And 2 years after that, I was elected dean of the School of Informatics. And this was, without a doubt, the most challenging period of my life in terms of time management. But at that time, Europe was undergoing a period of reform with the European higher education area, which impacted all sectors. And I was not only leading one of the engineering schools in computer science in Spain, but I was also chairing the conference of deans and representing the Spanish deans in European institutions. All of this while being the mother of 2 very young children. So many projects, endless meetings, countless trips, so much stress. That was really a difficult time. After 2 years leading the School of Informatics, the period finished, I stopped. And without knowing when and how, I realized that my expertise had radically changed. My strength was no longer software engineering, ontologies, deductive conceptual models, but my expertise was education, education in informatics. And that fact explains my next professional step. Professor Mateo Valero, the director of the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, at that time offered me the opportunity to build and lead an education and training unit at BSc, which is right now my main occupation, which I combine with being professor and researcher at UPC. In our unit, we participate and sometimes lead 7, 8 European and national projects, of course, in addition to the PhD program and the delivery of our own courses. At the university, I have my research team. And once again, many projects, many people involved, a lot of work and a lot of time management and organization required. That's life. To finish, to conclude, I would like to share with you a trait of my character, my way of doing things that I believe has helped me during times of high stress. In the professional sphere, in the professional framework, I don't like surprises. Improvising, I know that improvising makes me uneasy. So to stay calm, I avoid improvising by all means. And I hope that this is coherent with my piece of advice, the one that I provide, which is set achievable goals, try to prioritize effectively, and embrace flexibility to adapt to changing challenges. So I think that we will have time to comment on all that during the panel, during the discussion.
Thanks, Maria. Todd.
So hi, I am Todd. I am a senior computational scientist out at Argonne National Laboratory. I've been at Argonne National Laboratory for 24 years and a couple months now. Not that I'm counting. But I've been at Argonne for a long time. I've gone through a number of different career things throughout my time. So I got my PhD in computer science from the University of Wisconsin at Madison in 2000. Right after my PhD, I started up as a postdoc at Argonne National Laboratory. And then I moved up through the career stages at Argonne National Laboratory from postdoc to assistant scientist to scientist and now to a senior computational scientist out at the laboratory. During that time, I've managed a number of many different projects. So currently, I split my time between the Department of Energy, where I work in the Advanced Scientific Computing Research program for about half my time, as a detailee working with the Office of Science. And then my other half is in more of a research and management role for a little bit of research and a lot of management with regards to managing people and projects, where I manage several large projects for Argonne National Laboratory. I guess probably my best piece of advice is that there are really, really a lot of productivity systems out there, Pomodoro and all of these other things, and strategies. And what I find is that you have to find the one that works for you. There is no one size fits all for any of these things. So do what makes you most productive. I like using spreadsheets, so I use spreadsheets. And I will stop there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Betsy Hillary. I'm from Purdue University. My current title is the Director of Data Initiatives for the Regent Street Center for Healthcare Engineering. Tina, thank you for saying that. That is a mouthful. We are trying to shorten that. Really more about me. In my current role, I'm responsible for deploying technologies that impact social determinants of health for the life sciences organizations here at Purdue, including all the research that's going on. So I align research scientists with projects that fit into our social determinants of health that we're working with the state with. In addition to that, I have data scientists and I have the whole kind of infrastructure team that supports that initiative. How did I get here? So I recently, from this position, I came from research computing, so Rosen Center for Advanced Computing here at Purdue. My background is in I was the director for the infrastructure team. So we talk about large scale projects that Todd talked about. I've built 2 supercomputers, one during COVID. So you can imagine what that timeline looked like and the managing of times and projects that took to get that off the ground. So that's a really big time that I started to understand, and I think Todd hit on this. You have to work strategies that work for you, and especially given the time and the period of time you're talking about and where you're at in your life and what's going on, because not every project is a one size fits all. A little bit more about me. I do have a bachelor's of science in computer science. I have a master's here from Purdue, and then I also have a bachelor's of science in industrial organization working towards my PhD. I'm a co-chair in a lot of things in the community, and I love to run, bike, and hike. And one of the biggest things I think we always think about is our professional life, how to do project management, how to do time management. But as we all know, as professionals, our personal life and professional life sometimes overflow, and fighting back to find that balance that we started to talk about, it becomes very important, almost more important than just managing your day. And the biggest piece of advice I would like all of us to think about is you need finding good mentors that align with your goals, because it's really important to find people that can help you talk through projects and talk through timelines when it's needed, and then someone that can also say, is that a priority? And then, where are you at? Are you in early career? Are you in your early career? Because that's a totally different time and time sink into things versus mid to late career. We talked about having children. I have 2 twins, and I raised those 2 twins while my husband was away in Chicago for the 15 years they were raised. So I know all about time management, personal and professional. And I'm really great. I'm really glad to be here, and I hope we have a great conversation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abhinav Bhadele. I'm an associate professor of computer science at Maryland, and I lead a group which we call the Parallel Software and Systems Group. I did my PhD from Urbana-Champaign, Illinois in 2010. Like Maria, I also say often that I'm old now, especially if you're in academia. You know, I have students in my undergrad class that were not born when I started my PhD. So you start to feel old, you know. They have a very different language and how they, do things. After graduating with my PhD in 2010, I spent 8 years at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, which is in the Bay Area. I started as a postdoc. I was a postdoc for about 1.5 years. Then I converted to a staff position. And I was in the Center for Applied Scientific Computing, which is sort of where most CS PhDs are at Livermore. And I worked on a bunch of things related to high performance computing and machine learning and so on. And then around 2019, I decided that I wanted to move back to academia. This was always in the back of my mind that I want to go and teach. So I started applying for faculty jobs actually in 2018. And then in 2019, I got a good opportunity at UMD. So I moved here. I started as an assistant professor, which is typical, even if you have, been, even if your PhD has been quite a while ago. But then I had a flexible tenure clock, so I was able to get tenure in 3 years in 2022, if I remember correctly. And in terms of my research interest, my traditional training is in parallel computing and high performance computing. But with the increase in interest in AI, a lot of my students want to work on AI. So we also work on how do you use HPC for AI and how can you use AI for improving HPC systems. In terms of piece of advice, my advice would be to not compare yourself with others, especially when it comes to time. You might see other people, they have tens of papers or 20 papers, but then maybe they don't have a care, they don't have to take care of anyone. They don't have kids, right? I have 2 young kids, so I have to balance my time between family and work and so on. So set your own goals, and if as long as you achieve them, I think that's fine. It's also important to learn to delegate, and I didn't put that on here, but learn to say no, which is very useful when you are early and mid-career, because there's going to be lots of interesting opportunities, but you possibly cannot do all of them. So figuring out which ones are the most important and then saying no to others is a useful skill to develop. Yep, I'll stop there.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing now. And again, audience, you can raise your hand or type questions into the chat. I think all the pieces of advice we heard from the panelists touch on some of the questions we as a committee thought would be good to address in this panel. So some of you talked about having different directions, managing different projects, especially while you're juggling life as well. So one of the questions that we thought to ask here is, what does work for you in terms of managing multiple projects? Because no matter what career we take, we're going to have to do this at some point. So how did you make sure that you kept things on track, you met your deliverables without feeling overwhelmed?
I'm not sure that I did it without feeling overwhelmed,
Okay.
So yeah, you have to meet deliverables. I set timelines. I keep track of the things that are important and the things that are not so important. I sort of push off to the side and do later. And I think for me, because I have like these 2 different roles that are very different right now, I have to get into the mindset for each one. And so I try to have different times of the day where I'm working on my DOE stuff versus my other projects. And one other thing that I don't think that came up during the advice section that I would just tell everybody is you need to learn a 2-letter word, and that 2-letter word is no. So you need to be able to say no to things. If you're always saying yes to something, this piece of advice I've heard before, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So you need to choose your battles and choose what you want to do and learn how to tell people politely no to things that you don't really aren't really in your best interest.
Thanks, Todd. And I think that's one of the things we're looking to get to.
If I might add something, I would add that managing multiple projects means that you cannot know everything at the highest level of detail, and you must rely on your people and admit that some details are not, you cannot follow everything, no? Offer different levels of oversight depending on the complexity and on the people, and taking responsibility for mistakes as a team. I think that this is also something to be taken into account.
Yeah, that's very important too, because relying on other people and leaning on other people, if you're part of a team, you have to let go of some of your your beliefs and be a little vulnerable and trusting there.
Yeah, I'll add to what Maria said. I think when I started here as a professor, I was trying to figure out all the details of all the projects. Like I would try to do code reviews with my students in person, and that started becoming unscalable. I started with 4 PhD students, but now I have 8 PhD students and 6 master students, and just doesn't scale if I want to know everything on each project, right? So learning to delegate and trusting people that they're doing the right thing is very important. The other thing that has really helped me is using tools for management. So we use Notion, which is a tool for keeping meeting notes and to-dos and tasks. Especially if you have a lot of people who are reporting to you, it helps to use some management tools. So using Slack for communication, things like Notion for project management and task management, that actually helps a lot with figuring out what's happening on each project.
Yeah, and those tools also come in handy with deciding what can be handled over an email or a quick chat versus when do you actually have to call a meeting. Yeah, but Betsy, thanks.
Yeah.
Ellen.
Yeah, Tina, I was just going to add, similar to what you were going to say, and a bit of this is having some of that confidence. So as early career folks, dialing back into knowing you don't know when you can say no to a thing. So again, I would understand, if you understand the project, and if you don't, asking questions to help prioritize is absolutely the appropriate thing to do, especially as early career people. It's easy for me to say no now because I understand how to do my job. I've been in my career for a while. I understand who I can lean on. But especially as you're growing your community and your circle, having people you can bounce ideas off on, or even having a good leader to say, is this something I should say no to? Because if you don't know, you should always ask. And then always making sure that you're being realistic with yourself. It's okay to fail. It's okay to be overwhelmed, but recognizing that and then doing a post-mortem as you're working through some of that anxiety and that those large projects really helped me level set. So when I felt like I failed, I had to go back and say to myself, like, what specifically made me feel that way, and who can I talk to, or how to strategize so the next time? Because you're not ever going to get great at resilience without opening up and talking with people and communicating and getting that bench of people that can help you when you're in that early career.
Great. So let's pull the string a little bit. Oh, Sergio, were you going to chime in?
Yeah, just regarding this, I was now it's really trendy, the FOMO thing, no, fear of missing out.
Mhm.
How have you dealt, or how you deal with that? Because it's quite mentally monopolizing everything.
We actually joke about it because it is anxiety ridden, especially when you're all virtual and you're saying, like, did those 2 people meet without me? Is there something I should know about? That, Sergio, I would say as you build your confidence in your career, some of that goes away. Or asking if you can be invited to some of those things, even though it's awkward. I know it's practicing those personal skills. Sometimes just saying I'm interested also gets you invited to some of those things. But this FOMO is definitely a big thing that we're seeing with some of our early career folks, and it's real. And I appreciate that you brought that up.
Mm.
We'll come back to this whole notion of how to say no, because it is a tough skill to learn. But I want to acknowledge there's a question in chat. Ricardo, if you want to come off mute, you can ask it, or I can ask it for you.
Sure, no problem. I can ask it. My question was related to, I guess, this idea of saying no. And it seems like during your early career stage, you have a lot of opportunities or you meet a lot of people. And so it seems like you could have a lot of collaborations, but at the same time, you maybe would like to focus on one or two projects and make really good progress in those directions. So I guess I was curious to know how you balance those two maybe conflicting paths in your early career stage, and then also maybe looking back, which do you think is more beneficial?
So I personally think that the question about what's most beneficial will depend upon what your career path is and where you want to be. So if you want to be a professor or, get a Nobel Prize or something like that, you're going to want to focus on probably one or two areas where you can build up your credibility and your strength and be something to be known for. Whereas if you want to go in a different direction, maybe breadth is the right answer. So it'll really be dependent upon what your career goals are, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll say that the answer to this question really depends on your strengths. I have two kinds of people in my group, or two kinds of students, some that are great at managing multiple projects and some that really want to focus on one or two projects. So I think identifying what are your strengths, which one you work best in, what mode do you work best in, and then deciding if I should take up 5 projects or just focus on a few is, I think, more important than, will I lose out on some projects if I don't do them now?
Betsy or Hillary, or Betsy or Maria, sorry. Sorry.
I think that everything has been said. My concern here is that sometimes you don't have the opportunity to choose at early stages, and this might be a problem. And sometimes you don't know what do you want to be in 10 years when you start, no? So try to be happy with what you do, and if you are not, you must share with your boss. Usually your boss in that kind of work has been previously in your shoes and might understand that you hesitate, that you are not convinced. So my recommendation would be to share your concern with your advisor and explain to him how do you feel, and maybe he or she can adapt to your needs at each moment. That's sometimes you are not able to choose really, no, without the concurrence of your boss, of your advisor.
And the only thing I would tag on to what Todd was saying about understanding your career goals is actually building those career goals into your goals, that your professional goals, and making sure that as you're prioritizing your work, it aligns with those goals, because that's the next step. You should not really be working on work that, again, to everyone's point, as early career people, sometimes you don't get to make a choice what you get to work on. But then I would recommend what you're working on should align with your goals, because that's the only way you get to the next promotion, get the next opportunity. That would be the only additional thing I would add.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing that. And let's continue on with that, because now we're starting to see some themes around saying no in a way that is helpful to you and works for you and preserves your relationship. So, we all have our workload, milestones, objectives that we have to meet, projects that are assigned to us, and then there's extra stuff that may come our way. So what do you think professionals should do if they first of all, how do you assess whether or not you should say yes or no to something new? And how could you say, if you feel like you should say no, what are some tips there to help preserve the relationship with your boss, your collaborators, your teammates? I'm assuming that there's some negotiation that could be taking place to make sure that your needs are met.
I am
And-
terrible at this. To be honest, I'm terrible at saying no. I have not learned my lesson yet, to say no. Uh, However, there are things that I get tasked with when I'm asked by the lab director or the associate lab director. Those are things that I just cannot say no to. Those are like, bosses above, way above me that want something done. They ask me to do it, so I will go and do it. It's the other things that are more minor that I'll say no to more frequently. Things like, I don't think I should referee this paper, for example. It's going to take too much time and maybe you want to find somebody else. Things of that sort that I know that are a little bit time consuming, but are things that I can offload to other people who should be really learning something from that process.
So who's asking? Do you have the time? What else?
Well, if the lab director asks, even if I don't have the time, I'll go and do it anyways.
And I think it's also understanding it's this feeling of letting people down. So in my early days, trying to forge my way as a female person in a male dominated community, I never said no to anything because I felt like I couldn't. So actually starting to understand that it's okay to sometimes let people down. Like I'm going to let somebody down, and it's a me problem, not a them problem. So I think it's also understanding when you're saying no, how does that make you feel inside, and getting better at just knowing. Now I constantly let people down. I'll just say, I'm okay with saying, I just can't get to it. And it actually frees my headspace up then to do the right thing. So I guess I really want people to be thinking about, as you're seeing these opportunities, seeing that big picture that Todd talked about, but then also saying like, just repeating yourself and building that confidence about yourself is really important.
Just on top of that, to say that I was very bad when I was a young researcher in saying no, again for the same reasons that Betsy mentioned. Just one or two girls in a world dominated by men, you should fight with all you had, no? But from my perspective now, what I can share is how I like my people that are in my team telling me no. So when they argue, okay, Maria, at this moment I'm doing this and this and this and that, and I understood that the priority was this and this and this and that, and now you're asking me to do, I don't know what, and I cannot see how to manage. This is the way I like my PhD students or people of my team telling me no, because sometimes I lose the details of everyone's work because you are supervising a lot of projects, a lot of people, and sometimes you lose the detail. So explain what you are doing and which are the priorities you understood and why you are saying no. That's my advice, even though I've been very bad in doing that in the past.
I think that's a good piece of advice because that might open the door for more conversation about, okay, what can we move around so you can say yes to this if they really want you on this project. Abhinav, were you going to?
Yeah, I was going to add something about service commitments and when people ask requests about that. So as an academic, I can work on whatever research I want. So usually I don't have to pick and choose there. But you get lots of requests about service commitments, like, reviewing conference papers or journal papers or being on a committee. And I'll talk about both ends of it. Like if you're the one receiving a request, like I say no very often nowadays, now that I receive a lot of requests. And I haven't had anyone come back and be angry about it. In fact, like my department chair or the dean, when I've said no, they've been like, it's good that you understand your limits and what you can and cannot do, and you're saying no, right? Similarly, when I'm the one sending a request to someone, and HPC is becoming a diverse field, and we're trying to include more and more women, but that also means women are getting more and more requests. So I often have this where I'll send a request to a female colleague that I know, and they'll say, no, I have too many things. And I don't feel bad about it, like as a one requesting this. So I think it's completely okay to say no. No one feels bad that you're saying no. And it's not like you don't get invited back if you say no once. So especially with service appointments, they are coming out of the same time you have 24 hours in the day. So you should be very careful about which ones you say yes to.
Yeah. Yeah. So aligning those back to your career goals, like we talked about earlier, and saying no in a way that, you know, if you explain a little bit, you preserve those relationships. I think it's often the case where we think if we say no to something, it's just going to totally kill our career. And that's not necessarily true. So I know some folks like to advocate for no being a complete sentence, and yeah, there are times for that, but you know, in the workplace, you want to preserve those relationships and leave the door open for future opportunities. Maybe it's more helpful to do what the panelists said here, is to explain everything that you have going on and why you can't take on this project now. And there could also be pieces of things that you can also say yes to. So leaving the door open for that conversation. Thanks, everyone. And Dana has a question in the chat. Dana, would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Oh, sure. Hi, I'm Dana. I was just curious about when you kind of feel like it's time to maybe move on from a job and start looking other places for opportunities.
Can I start this one? This is a perfect timing for me. About a year ago, I switched jobs. So I mentioned I was at Rosen Center for Advanced Computing, and I switched jobs. And part of that, Dana, was I just didn't feel passionate anymore. I would come into work and I just felt really disconnected from the work. I didn't feel like I was giving what I wanted to the job. And I had to realize that if I'm going to spend 8 hours a day or whatever you spend away from your family, you better love what you're doing. And so I'm really passionate about if I'm not feeling that I'm getting out of the job that I want to get out of it, it's time to move on. So if you don't feel like you're getting career opportunities, it's probably time to either have a difficult conversation with your leader or time to move on. If you feel like you're not getting technical advancement, things that make you feel good that you want to get out of bed for, then I would definitely say start putting those feelers out there and then interview. I honestly, I love my job, and I just interviewed at a university 2 weeks ago for a director of a position because they wanted me to, and it was a great experience. So I think it's always, the door is always open.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I think that's great advice. If you're no longer having fun in your position, you should probably not be doing it.
Okay, and we have another question in the chat that I think is going to bring lead us down towards talking a little bit more about resilience. Sissy, do you want to come off chat and ask, or come off mute and ask your question?
Oh, yes. So I'm a national lab research too. I love my job. I'm passionate. The thing I feel that is I always don't have enough time. I have a whole stuff on my list I need to do, and every day I'm running from deadline to deadline. But after 5, I have to go to the school and pick up my kids, and then the kids have football, soccer, and they are twins. They keep talking to me, and it's like, oh, I'm driving crazy. So what my life is now? I have no exercise, no personal hobbies, and like doing 2 jobs. One is for the kid, one is for the work. Yeah, I know this question is really old question, but I really want to know the suggestions from you. Like, how do you balance that motherhood and work and the personal life?
The amazing thing is, I think both Todd and I can respond to this. Todd also has twins, and I have twins. Todd, do you want to go first?
No, why don't you go first? So, or I could go first. So, you know, when the twins were young, what I ended up doing was I sacrificed a lot of sleep so that I could go and do the things that I wanted to do. I still have no idea how I did it. So when my kids were, you know, between the ages of 3 and 5, I took up marathoning. And so I was training for marathons and running, you know, at like 3 o'clock in the morning to 5 before they would get up, and then going and doing stuff with the kids all day long. So I don't know how I did it. I have a supportive wife, and so she helps out and she stays home with the kids as well, which helps out quite a bit. And she chauffeurs them for the most part. And then mine are now 18 and going on to college. So it does get easier, I would say.
Yeah.
Once they become mobile themselves and can drive themselves back and forth to school, it actually becomes easier. But yeah, it's a really tough challenge, and it's hard.
Yeah. And I would only add that, like when we first started, understanding that you're not just managing your professional career, you're managing your entire life. And especially during this period of your time where you're in the trenches, just trying to be a mom, trying to be a professional, but understanding that that's a continuum, they don't stop. So the job just doesn't stop. The home life doesn't stop. It's understanding and managing that as a full picture and not just compartmentalizing it. Because when you do, that sometimes really it starts to compete between professional and personal life. And so, yeah, and mine are now 24, both doing PhDs. So you do survive through it. It's okay. You'll get through it. Does the other two panelists, you both have children as well. So, and yours are early career Abhinav, aren't they? Or early? So like.
Yeah, I have kids that are 4 and 8. So one thing that I do is I take my work whenever I have to take them somewhere. So for example, if I have to take my older one to a piano lesson, I'll just take my laptop and I sit there and work. Or even if I'm taking them to a birthday party, sometimes I'll take my laptop and, I just don't talk to parents one day, and I think it's okay. I don't need to talk to everyone. So, so that's, I think, how I try to, or I'll sit in my car and work if I'm taking them somewhere. Yeah, but it's hard. I agree. Especially when kids are young, it's not easy.
I cannot imagine having twins because I had difficulties only with my first son and second son. But I remember that especially the second one arrived while I was teen, so a lot of traveling. And what I tried to establish rules very clearly. For instance, if there is a plane arriving on time so as I can see my sons before going to sleep, this plane should be the one, no? Provide instructions to people that can help you in doing a better job, no? Because someone else is buying is buying the plane ticket, someone else is organizing your time. So this person must have a clear idea of your priorities, right? Avoid dinners by all means. Everything should be solved during the day, not at night, no? Try to adapt, no? And try to establish rules for the people working with you.
And the other thing that I would just remind you about is that the kids are only young once. Enjoy them and spend time with them while you can. And your career will adjust as well to that.
Of course.
And I know that we all love parallel processing, and I will just say that in terms of kids, parallel processing is no contest to serial processing in my view. But yeah, so yeah, it's difficult, but you'll get through it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So we have about 8 minutes left. So audience, please keep sharing your questions. These are good questions. I'm going to turn us back to one question, though, that we haven't gotten to yet. And that is, so with this, we're talking about time management and resilience, and they really kind of go hand in hand. So what does resilience mean to you? How would you define it? And what are some other tips that you have for building resilience in the way you define it?
Okay, that's difficult, no? But maybe, maybe do your best to focus on your goals. Maybe this would be one characteristic of a resilient person. learn from the mistakes, no, in a positive way. And also do not devote much energy to things that are not under your control. There are things that you cannot change, big life events that simply happens and you cannot control, but also small things in everyday life. So maybe do not devote time to things that you cannot control, and focus on the objectives and be proactive and positive. I don't know, maybe this is not resilience, but is how I understand it.
No, I think that feeds right into it, especially the part about there are things that you cannot control. So what can you control?
So the things that you can control are your own actions. I mean, that's really the only thing that you can actually have any sort of control over yourself, what you do, how you do it, and how you approach others.
And Todd, just to tag on that, and then to continuously build that toughness that I can recoup from this. You know, you mentioned you're a marathoner. Running is a really good example. You have to build resilience to get to that marathon, and just understanding that you're gonna have hard days, and being able to recoup from that in a graceful way, and then just again pivot and move on. Just like it's all spinning that, you know, flywheel. I'm going to get better. I'm going to get better. It's all about developing that self-will, that confidence inside to continue to move on.
Yeah. And the reason I took up running, by the way, was I was often angry at certain people at work. And so I'd run to take out my anger issues.
I'm glad I did that.
Doing exercise helps a lot.
Yeah.
It does not have to be a marathon, but feeling physically tired helps to sleep. Sleep is important, helps to relax. Being relaxed at least for a while is important. So trying to do exercise, I think it's a good advice also.
Abhinav?
Yeah, I don't have any concrete thoughts other than what has been said already.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, and it's, Betsy, you touched on one of the things that came up on that LinkedIn crowdsourcing advice on how do you stay resilient, and that's kind of gets to learning through failure and learning through mistakes. So and I see resilience as not always having to be super strong and happy and calm. You have to let yourself feel those emotions. You have to let yourself feel disappointed. But then what are you going to do with that information? Okay, and so some of the resources that were shared provide some strategies and tools for dealing with moving forward. Because like, you know, Maria said, you can't dwell on things. You know, you have to get past it somehow. And that's, to me, that's kind of what resilience is. It's not necessarily always putting on your happy face, but being able to recoup from the challenges. I heard that. And finding ways to help yourself stay grounded.
The other thing that I would say about resilience is you have to learn how to forgive yourself. So you will be making mistakes. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And you really have to be able to forgive yourself if you let yourself down or other people down. And that's something that you really just have to learn how to do.
And Sergio dropped a question in chat, because I think this also speaks to the always on environment that we work and live in right now. So Sergio, do you want to?
Yeah, coming back to time management, yeah, if you have your business emails in your phone, because for me it's pretty costly context switching, and that's like bugging myself all the day.
So I personally do not. And, from the Department of Energy side, they have their personal phone and they have their work phone, and they usually leave their work phone at work. So.
Okay, 2 phones, it's an option.
I do have my emails in my phone. I read it.
Yeah, I do have my Slack and work email on my phone, but I usually just read it and I don't respond until after the weekend. Unless like something is really urgent and someone needs something like on the weekend or after hours.
So getting back to what Todd said earlier is there are things that are out of your control that you can't dwell on that, but there are things you can control. And one of those is setting those boundaries. And so deciding what those boundaries are for you. And if that means hiding your work, having your work email on your phone and then hiding that app when you're on your personal time, that's one way to do that. Not putting it on there at all. Setting out of office replies that are, respectful of people's times and wanting people to be respectful of your time. A lot of different strategies you could use there. One thing that we heard earlier in the conversation, especially when it comes to saying no and managing your time, is learning how to delegate. So why don't we end on that piece? How do you delegate if you don't have anyone to delegate to?
Maybe you can try to find help in your mates, share work with somebody else. Today it's you and tomorrow it will be me. If you don't have anyone to delegate, then colleagues, no? Can be a strong support. I've been very lucky on that, and I've always had good colleagues. And sometimes, in difficult times, they help me, and I try to do the same.
Susanna raised her hand. Susanna, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I want to agree with Maria. And I think one of the best ways is to start building your relationship as soon as possible. Don't wait till you need something from someone to ask. I think it's important to foster and be there for them and be authentic yourself. And then when time comes, you can ask for help and most likely you'll receive. I think it's important to work on that, on personal relationships.
Yeah. And it speaks to everything being a negotiation, right? So maybe part of your conversation in deciding whether or not you take on something new or take on an extra project is, okay, what can I delegate? Who can I delegate it to? There may be other people that could help that aren't your direct reports. I mean, there could be other folks that you could pull in. But that should be part of the conversation, especially if you're struggling with whether or not you want to say no. Okay. Good piece of advice to end on. So we're at time. So let's maybe do a quick rapid fire with the panel, unless anyone from the audience has a question that you really want us to fit in. But rapid fire from the panel, you can just, whoever wants to go first, go first. Key takeaway you want folks to leave with today.
Do what you're passionate about and do what makes sense for you.
Oh, you're muted, Betsy.
I'm going to agree with Todd 100%. You got to do what feels good and you got to be passionate about it because that's how you build that resilience.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And if you start seeing that you're unhappy in a job, it might be time to move on.
Okay. If I might add, if you plan, you will be more efficiently and you will be and we will be able to feel better. Be organized and plan.
Thanks, everyone. Being passionate, feed your positive energy. Planning helps you pivot and respond when you need to. So thanks panel, and thanks to the audience for joining us today. I hope you found this helpful. I think that's all we have time for though.